Have you ever looked back at something that once devastated you and realized that it changed the direction of your life in a way you could not understand at the time? A door closed and you thought you had lost the opportunity that was supposed to change everything. A relationship ended and you believed you would never recover from the absence it created. A plan collapsed after you had invested your time, your hope, and your energy into making it work. And while you were living through it, there was no deeper meaning. There was only disappointment, confusion, grief, and the frightening feeling that your life was moving in the wrong direction. But then time passed. You saw something you could not see from inside the pain. That closed door prevented you from remaining trapped in something that would have eventually suffocated you. That ending exposed a truth you had been trying not to face. That delay forced you to develop a strength, a boundary, or a level of self-trust you would later need. This does not mean that everything painful happens for a reason. It does not mean that every loss was secretly good. And it does not mean that life will always give you exactly what you want if you remain positive long enough. But it may mean that the meaning of your life cannot always be determined by how one moment feels while you are standing inside it. Some experiences look like destruction because you are too close to see what they are changing. Some endings look final because you cannot yet see what will begin beyond them. And sometimes what feels like everything going wrong is the beginning of your life moving in a direction you never would have chosen, but may eventually understand. 1. Sometimes emptiness appears when the old meaning has expired. There are periods when nothing on the outside looks dramatically different. You still wake up in the same place. You move through familiar routines. You speak to the same people. You look at the same goals you once cared deeply about. But internally, something feels absent. The life around you is still functioning, yet you no longer feel connected to it in the same way. What once excited you feels distant. What once motivated you no longer produces the same urgency. What once gave you direction begins feeling strangely empty. And because there is no obvious explanation, you may begin wondering whether something is wrong with you. You may try to force yourself to become more motivated. You may return to old routines, hoping they will restore the version of you who once found meaning in them. You may criticize yourself for being ungrateful, unfocused, or unable to appreciate what you have. But sometimes the emptiness is not evidence that you are broken. Sometimes it is what remains after you have outgrown the meaning you once attached to your life. The goal may still exist. The job may still exist. The relationship may still exist. The identity may still exist. But the part of you that once depended on those things to feel complete may be changing. And before a new source of meaning emerges, there can be an uncomfortable space where nothing feels strong enough to take the old meaning's place. That space can feel frightening because people are often more comfortable with familiar dissatisfaction than undefined change. At least the old life was recognizable. You knew your role. You knew what you were supposed to pursue. You knew which version of yourself to perform. But now, something within you may be refusing to keep investing energy into a life that no longer feels alive. You may not need to immediately fix that emptiness. You may need to listen to what it is revealing, what no longer feels meaningful. What are you maintaining only because it is familiar? What would you have to admit if you stopped forcing yourself to want what you once wanted? The emptiness may not be the end of your connection to life. It may be the clearing where a more honest connection can eventually form. 2. Not every closed door is proof that you were rejected by life. When something you deeply wanted does not work out, the mind often turns the experience into a judgment. You were not chosen because you were not good enough. The relationship ended because you were not lovable enough. The opportunity disappeared because you were not talented enough. The plan failed because you made the wrong choices. Rejection rarely remains a single event. It can quickly become a story about who you are and what you deserve. But a closed door cannot always tell you why it closed. You only know that you wanted to enter and were prevented from doing so. You do not know what remaining on that path might have cost you. You do not know what you would have had to sacrifice to keep the opportunity. You do not know whether the life behind that door would have matched the version of you who was still emerging. And you do not know what direction you may take, precisely because the path you expected is no longer available. Sometimes a closed door is simply painful. There is no need to pretend that you are immediately grateful for it. You are allowed to grieve the future you imagined. You are allowed to feel disappointed that your effort did not produce the outcome you wanted. But you do not have to turn the ending into proof that your entire life is ending with it. There are plans that collapse because they were built around a version of you who no longer exists. There are opportunities that disappear because your life is moving beyond what you once believed was your only option. There are relationships that end because continuing them would require you to keep abandoning parts of yourself. You may not see the redirection immediately. At first, all you may see is the place where the road stopped. But a road ending is not the same as your journey ending. Sometimes it is where you are finally forced to look in another direction. 3. You may not be late. You may be living according to a different timeline. One of the hardest things about uncertainty is watching other people appear to move forward while your own life feels suspended. People your age may seem more settled. They may have reached milestones you assumed you would have reached by now. They may have the career, family, home, financial stability, audience, business, relationship, or sense of purpose you are still trying to create. And each time you see their progress, you may feel as though an invisible clock is measuring everything you have not accomplished. You begin treating life like a race whose rules everyone else somehow understood before you did. But comparison removes the context from every life it measures. You see someone's arrival without seeing what the path required. You see the result without knowing whether it actually feels fulfilling. You see the timing without seeing the experiences that shaped it. And then you compare their visible milestone to your most uncertain internal season. There is no fair comparison between those two things. Some lives become stable early. Other lives move through multiple endings, reinventions, losses, relocations, awakenings, and difficult detours before anything begins to feel settled. Neither path automatically has more value. The fact that your life has taken longer to make sense does not mean it has failed to become meaningful. You may need experiences that other people did not need. You may be building something that requires a different kind of preparation. You may be recovering from circumstances that affected your ability to move at the pace you expected. And perhaps the timeline you once wanted belonged to a version of your life that would no longer fit you now. So know that you are not late simply because your life does not resemble someone else's, or because your life is unfolding differently from theirs. 4. The parts of yourself you rejected may become part of the life you build next. Sometimes people believe everything will work out once they finally become a better version of themselves. Less emotional, less sensitive, less intense, less afraid, more productive, more disciplined, more acceptable. They spend years trying to remove anything that makes them feel different from the people around them. But some of the qualities you tried to eliminate may not have been weaknesses. They may have been parts of you that were never given the right environment in which to become useful. Your sensitivity may have made certain experiences more painful, but it may also allow you to recognize what other people overlook. Your intensity may have made you feel like too much in places that expected you to remain small. But that same intensity may become devotion, creativity, conviction, or the energy required to build something meaningful. Your slower pace may have been criticized in environments that rewarded constant production, but it may also reflect thoughtfulness, discernment, or your refusal to move before something feels right. Your emotional depth may have felt burdensome when no one around you knew how to hold it, but that depth may later become the foundation of the art you create, the support you offer, or the truth you are capable of expressing. This does not mean every trait should be romanticized. Some patterns need to be questioned. Some reactions need to be healed. Some behaviors need to change. But healing is not the same as erasing yourself. You do not become whole by cutting away every part of you that once made someone else uncomfortable. Sometimes your life begins working differently when you stop trying to build it around the person you thought you had to become. The future may require more of your real self, not less. 5. Everything may begin changing when you stop trying to control every outcome. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from believing you must hold every part of your life together through force. You constantly think ahead. You prepare for every possibility. You replay conversations before they happen. You try to anticipate disappointment so it cannot surprise you. You grip your plans tightly because you believe that loosening your control will cause everything to collapse. And perhaps that control helped you survive periods when life truly was unpredictable. But eventually, controlling everything can become another source of instability. You become exhausted not only by what is happening, but by your belief that you must personally prevent anything else from going wrong. Letting go does not mean you stop caring. It does not mean becoming passive. It does not mean waiting for life to rescue you while you take no action. It means recognizing the difference between what is yours to carry and what is not. You can send the application. You cannot control who reviews it. You can create the work. You cannot control exactly when people discover it. You can communicate honestly. You cannot control whether someone is capable of receiving the truth. You can make a plan. You cannot guarantee that life will unfold according to it. There is peace in accepting that your responsibility is the next honest action, not complete control over the final result. Sometimes things begin working out when you stop exhausting yourself trying to dictate the exact form in which they must arrive. What you receive may not look like the answer you expected, but it may still move you closer to what you actually need. 6. You usually understand the path after you have already traveled it. While you are in the middle of an experience, you rarely have enough distance to see its full shape. A loss feels like a loss. A delay feels like a delay. A failure feels like a failure. The mind wants to label each moment immediately. Good or bad, success or setback, beginning or ending. But life does not always reveal the role of an experience at the moment it occurs. Sometimes years pass before you understand what one decision changed. You look back and realize that the job you did not get led you toward work you never would have considered. The relationship that ended forced you to confront a pattern you would otherwise have continued repeating. The period when you felt most directionless gave you the space to discover what you actually wanted. The life that collapsed exposed how much of it had been built around survival, approval, fear, or obligation. The meaning did not exist because the pain was secretly beautiful. The meaning emerged from what you eventually created after it. That is an important difference. You are not required to believe that everything that happened was supposed to happen. But you are allowed to believe that what happened does not have to be the end of what is possible. You can take what harmed you and still build something that reflects your truth. You can lose the path you expected and still discover another one. You can be changed by an experience without allowing it to define the limits of your future. And perhaps that is what it really means to say that things can work out in the end. Not that every wound disappears. Not that every person returns. Not that every dream unfolds exactly as imagined, but that your life can continue forming beyond what you thought would destroy it. Conclusion. Perhaps you cannot see how any of this will make sense yet. You may still be living inside the disappointment, still trying to understand why the door closed, still watching other people move forward while you are rebuilding from something they never had to carry, still wondering whether the emptiness means you have lost your way. You do not have to force yourself to call it a blessing. You do not have to pretend the uncertainty feels peaceful, and you do not have to know how the story ends in order to continue living through the chapter you are in. You only have to remember that the meaning of this moment is not limited to what it feels like today. There are things you may understand only after you have gained enough distance. There are strengths you may recognize only after you are placed in a situation that requires them. There are paths you may discover only because the original one ended. And there are versions of yourself that may never have emerged if everything had continued according to the old plan. What currently looks like disorder may not remain disorder forever. What currently feels like rejection may eventually reveal itself as redirection. What currently feels like a delay may be giving you time to become clearer about what you actually want. And what currently feels like the end of your life, as you knew it, may eventually become the place where another life began taking shape. If this video helped you see your journey differently, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share it with someone who is struggling to believe that life can still become something meaningful after everything that has happened. Because everything working out does not necessarily mean everything returns to the way it was. If this video helped you put language to something you have been experiencing, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share it with someone who may also be struggling to understand the season they are moving through. Because sometimes what is ending is not evidence that everything has gone wrong. Sometimes it is the beginning of your life taking a different shape, one that may eventually make more sense than it does right now. Sometimes it means you survive the ending. You release what can no longer continue. You become someone the old life could not have contained. And eventually, you build something different from what you originally imagined, but far more honest about who you are now.